Hello and welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Gabriel the Bibi Capaldi and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please do check down below that you are subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free and helps us pop up on your feed a bit more often. The rusty dagger lay on the table, already cleaned of human blood but still bearing the effects of contact with it. This was an unfortunate consequence of the Kretar's first encounter with humanity. A chance meeting between two exploration groups who, despite their shared purpose in exploring this world, had nothing else in common, whether biologically or culturally. The bridge of the exploratory ship was silent. Liquid metal furniture adjusted itself to the occupant's needs, the table beneath the dagger now solid as it compensated for the weapon's weight. The metal flowed like mercury but held its shape, creating surfaces that were both functional and aesthetically pleasing to the Kretar eye. Izilla stood before the viewing port, her translucent form absorbing the light in patterns that would have been beautiful to human eyes, though no human had yet had the chance to appreciate such aesthetics. As leader of the exploration team, the responsibility for conflict resolution fell squarely on her shoulders. The weight of it settled in her consciousness, like sediment in still water. Yet at this moment, she could only marvel at how fundamentally different the two species seemed to be. Where the Kretar were transparent, revealing every emotion through the flow of specialized fluids, humans hid themselves beneath opaque skin and layers of fabric. Where the Kretar drew energy directly from starlight, humans apparently burned their food using oxygen, a waste product that the Kretar expelled as naturally as humans breathed it. The differences went deeper than mere biology. In the first few moments of contact, before everything went wrong, she had observed how humans moved. Quick, sharp gestures so unlike the flowing movements of her people. The door to the bridge dilated open, interrupting her thoughts. The liquid metal aperture spreading wide to accommodate Sozir's rushed entry. He stormed through, and his transparent body betrayed his agitation immediately. Amber liquid swirled through his circulatory system like storm clouds, while his neural pathways flickered with the telltale purple of anxiety. The colors moved through him in waves, each emotion chasing the last in a display that any Kretar could read as easily as humans might read facial expressions. Only his eyes remained opaque, dark orbs set above the faint outline of his skeletal structure that gave his face definition. Those bones, calcified cartilage really, were the only truly solid parts of a Kretar's body, providing anchor points for their fluid-filled muscle analogues. "They have oxygen in their blood." Sozir didn't bother with greetings. "Oxygen, Izilla, the very substance that corrodes metal, that we expel as waste. They carry it through their bodies like we carry photonic cells." Izilla continued to gaze out the viewing port, her own internal fluids maintaining the steady blue-green of calm consideration. She had learned long ago that responding to Sozir's agitation with her own only created feedback loops of anxiety. Better to remain steady, to be the fixed point around which others could orbit. Their blood, if it could even be called that, stored energy in specialized cells that were more closely related to organic batteries than the human equivalent. Each cell contained photonic receptors that could trap and hold stellar radiation in different chemical processes, then oxidation, releasing it slowly to power biological processes. Humans, apparently, were walking combustion engines, burning food and oxygen to extract energy in a process that seemed almost primitive by comparison. "Think about what that means," Sozir continued. "Their entire biology is based on controlled burning. They're literally on fire internally, all the time. How can a species survive like that?" "The same way we survive, by being walking photonic collectors," Izilla replied mildly. "Evolution finds different solutions to the same problems." Sozir's amber stress fluids deepened, spreading throughout his body like spilled paint. "They have to constantly consume material for energy. I don't think they can't survive more than days without fresh fuel. We can go for weeks on stored energy alone." "Sozir," she finally interrupted, turning from the viewing port to face him fully.
We need to think of a solution to resolve this conflict, not panic about their biology. If we can't find a way to coexist, the exploration of this planet becomes impossible. Both our species will spend more time looking over our shoulders than conducting science. Is that what you want? To abandon this world because we're afraid of beings who breathe differently than we do?
Sozier's form rippled with indignation, fluids swirling faster through his transparent tissues. How can you be so calm about this? These humans attacked one of our own. Their blood turns our steel to rust. They hide their bodies and their intentions behind layers of fabric and opaque skin. How can we trust a species that conceals everything? Izilla moved away from the viewing port, her movements deliberately slow and flowing. She approached the table where the dagger lay, running a finger along its rust-damaged surface.
They didn't attack our ship after the incident. I've reviewed the footage multiple times, Sozier. Their only concern was getting their injured member back to their camp for treatment. They didn't pursue us. They didn't attempt to infiltrate our ship. They simply retreated with their wounded.
Your analysis is flawed, Sozier argued. We should prepare for retaliation. How do we know they aren't planning something right now? We cannot trust a species whose insides are as hidden as their intentions. For all we know, they could be feeling rage or hatred, and we would never see it coming.
The sudden encounter was likely as shocking to them as it was to us,
Izilla explained, lifting the dagger and examining it more closely.
While our AIs worked on translation protocols, both sides were left with nothing but fear and imagination. How many terrifying scenarios did your mind conjure in those first moments, Sozier? I know mine created dozens. I believe the explosion that startled our people was simply an equipment failure in their camp, not a weapon.
You're making dangerous assumptions. Sozier's form pulsed with agitation. What if you're wrong? What if they're as violent as their biology suggests? Creatures that burn food for fuel, that carry corrosive oxygen in their blood? How can such beings be anything but aggressive?
Then let's review the incident again,
Izilla suggested, placing the dagger back on the table carefully.
Perhaps the virtual interface will help us see things more clearly. You're making judgments based on fear, not facts.
Without a thought, both Kritar activated their neural implants. The technology was seamlessly integrated into their biology, grown rather than installed. The bridge dissolved around them in a shimmer of light, reality pixelating and reforming. The virtual interface reconstructed the scene with perfect clarity. Every photon that had touched their recording devices was preserved and reproduced. The alien landscape materialized around them, with its orange sun hanging low on the horizon and strange vegetation dotting the terrain between two encampments. The recording began with both teams approaching each other cautiously. 5 individuals on each side, moving with the careful steps of those who knew they were making history. The Kritar delegation wore minimal coverings, thin, transparent garments that served more as cultural courtesy than concealment. The fabric was designed to not interfere with photonic absorption, while providing pockets for scientific instruments. Every emotion was visible in the flow of their internal fluids: curiosity in swirling silver, caution in deep purple, excitement in effervescent gold. The colors mixed and merged, creating a complex emotional palette that spoke of hope mixed with appropriate wariness. The humans, by contrast, were completely covered. Thick fabric obscured their bodies from neck to feet, with only their faces and hands exposed. The clothing appeared to be made of multiple layers, an inner layer of white, covered by a middle layer of blue, topped with various equipment strapped to the outside. Even from recording, Izilla could see how this troubled her team. Melix, young and inexperienced, kept glancing at the others, his confusion evident in the muddy brown swirls through his system. How could you trust a species that hid so much?
Perhaps it's a cultural trait,
Izilla murmured, watching the two groups draw closer.
or maybe their skin serves a different function than ours. Temperature regulation, perhaps? A protection from their single sun's radiation.
Or concealment of weapons, Sozir added darkly. The virtual recording showed both groups regarding each other. The Kratar team leader, Izilla, watched her past self with regret, raised a hand in what they'd agreed was a universal gesture of greeting. The translation was limited, their respective AIs having had only minutes to analyze each other's languages. But basic concepts were getting through. Numbers, simple nouns, basic emotional concepts, enough to establish that both groups came in peace, that both were explorers, that both were far from home.
Look at their faces,
Izilla instructed, manipulating the recording to zoom in on the human delegation.
See how expressive they are? The muscle movements, the way their eyes change shape, the colors that flush through their skin. It's all communication.
Then it happened. Near the human encampment, something exploded with a sharp crack and a burst of flame. The sound shattered the delicate tension like a hammer against glass. The recording captured everything, the bright flash of light, the smoke that billowed upward, the way every being in both groups flinched at the unexpected noise. One of the Kratar scientists, young Melix, Izilla noted with regret that tasted bitter in her photonic reserves, panicked. His fear spiked to critical levels, flooding his system with the deep red of fight-or-flight response. The color spread through him like wildfire, overwhelming his rational thought centers in seconds. Without thinking, perhaps without even consciously deciding, he used his implant to summon the maintenance drones.
"Watch this closely,"
Izilla said, slowing the recording.
"See how his fear spreads to the others? Vazril goes red next, then Corim. Fear is contagious, Sozir. It doesn't matter what species you are."
The nearest drone, designed for ship repair and equipped with various tools, interpreted Melix's panicked mental state as a call for defense. Its simple AI, never designed for complex threat assessment, saw elevated stress and proximity of unknown beings and reached a logical but catastrophic conclusion. It extended a sharp steel implement, a sharp tool, and struck out at the nearest human. The blade moved almost too fast to follow, even in the slowed recording. It caught the human, a young man with pale skin and red hair, across the forearm as he raised it in instinctive defense. The fabric of his clothing parted like water, and crimson blood flowed freely from the wound.
"There!"
Izilla paused the recording at the moment of contact.
"Look at the human's face. That's not aggression, that's shock, pain, fear. The same emotions our people were feeling."
Chaos erupted in the recording. The injured human cried out, the sound sharp and distressing, even through the replay. His companions reacted instantly, some rushing to his aid while others retreated toward their camp. The human leader was shouting orders. Within moments, some humans returned with objects that were unmistakably weapons, long metal tubes that they pointed at the Kratar delegation.
"They didn't fire,"
Izilla noted, letting the recording continue.
"They could have. Those were projectile weapons, and they had clear shots, but they held their fire."
The Kratar team's fear hormones spiked collectively, their transparent bodies flushing deep red with alarm. The color was so intense it was almost opaque, turning their normally translucent forms into crimson shadows. Their own security drones responded to the perceived threat, forming a protective barrier as the team retreated rapidly to their ship. The recording showed them moving in synchronization, their shared fear creating an unconscious harmony of movement. The virtual interface faded, returning them to the bridge. Sozir's form was still agitated, his fluids darker than before. The orange had deepened to an almost brown color that spoke of prolonged anxiety. "You see," he said immediately, "they came back with weapons. They were prepared for violence. They probably carry those weapons all the time, hidden under their coverings."
"After one of their own was injured," Izilla countered. "It was a defensive response, not an aggressive one. Put yourself in their position, Soze. Unknown aliens just attacked one of your team with a blade. What would you do?
I wouldn't hide weapons under false coverings, Soze retorted.
We don't know they were hiding anything. For all we know, those weapons were tools, just like our drones had a tool that became a weapon in a moment of panic.
It doesn't matter. Soze's form changed colors with each word. We should relocate to the other side of the planet. Let them have this hemisphere. We have no chance of making friends with a species so alien that oxygen flows through their veins, and they refuse to show basic transparency by removing their coverings. How can we have meaningful communication with beings who hide everything? Izilla felt her own patience wearing thin, her calm blue-green beginning to tinge with yellow irritation. The color started at her core and spread outward like ink in water.
We know nothing about human culture, Soze. Their skin has colors, pigmentation that our species lacks. Perhaps it serves a function we don't understand. It would be impossible for them to display emotional states through internal fluids as we do. They're not hiding. They're simply different.
She reactivated the virtual interface, this time focusing on close-ups of human faces from the recording. The technology allowed her to zoom in until she could see individual pores, the fine hair on their skin, the way their pupils dilated and contracted.
Look,
she instructed, focusing on the human leader's face in the moments before the explosion.
See how their facial muscles contract and shift? The way her eyebrows draw together. That's concentration. And here, she moved to another human. See how his mouth turns downward? That's concern or worry. They communicate through external movement rather than internal transparency.
It's so limited, Soze observed reluctantly. How can they convey complex emotional states with just facial movements?
Perhaps they have other methods we haven't observed yet. Pheromones, sounds outside our hearing range, electromagnetic fields. We don't know enough to make judgments, which is exactly why we need to try again,
Izilla argued, dismissing the interface with a thought.
It would be foolish not to attempt communication now that both sides have functioning translators. Think of what we could learn from each other, a species that found a completely different solution to the energy problem.
No one has tried to contact anyone since the incident, Soze pointed out, his colors shifting to a resigned purple-gray. Their scientists are afraid, and ours just want to relocate. The Council is already discussing abandoning this planet. Elder Thrix has called for a full retreat.
Then I'll initiate contact myself,
Izilla declared, her internal fluids shifting to the deep blue of determination. The color was so intense it seemed to glow, photonic energy crackling along her major vessels.
We should apologize for the incident and offer assistance if they need it. Despite our differences, our technology levels don't seem vastly disparate. We could be valuable to each other.
If the humans want revenge, you'll be their primary target, Soze warned, his concern genuine despite his frustration. You'd be walking into danger alone. What if their blood corrodes more than just metal? What if it's toxic to ours?
They haven't attacked so far,
Izilla dismissed his concern.
I believe they have enough intelligence to understand that the explosion caused panic among our people, and that the incident was born of fear, not malice.
This is foolish. Soze's form pulsed with agitation. The Council will have you removed from command.
This is my decision, Izilla stated firmly. I'm going alone because I'm less likely to panic if there's another incident. I've led exploration teams for 10 rotations, Soze. I've made first contact once before. I know how to handle sudden changes.
Soze's form rippled with a complex mix of emotions, frustration, concern, and reluctant respect, all swirling through his transparent body. The Council won't approve of this.
The Council put me in charge of this mission, Izilla reminded him. First contact protocols are mine to establish, and I'm establishing that we try again, with apologies and open communication.
And if it resolves with you being dissected by curious humans?
Then at least they'll know something about our biology,
Izilla replied with dark humor, a swirl of black amusement mixing with her determination. 1 hour later, Izilla stood at the top of her ship's ramp, preparing to descend. She had removed even the minimal transparent coverings the Kritar sometimes wore, choosing to approach the humans in the natural state of her species. Her transparent skin revealed the complex network of fluid veins that channeled photonic energy throughout her body, currently glowing with a soft blue-green luminescence as she absorbed the orange sunlight. The human settlement was visible in the distance, a collection of rigid structures they called tents, so different from the Kritar's flowing liquid metal architecture. The structures seemed to be made of some kind of synthetic fabric stretched over rigid frames, creating angular shapes that looked almost aggressive. The orange sun of this world felt perfect against her skin, its wavelength ideal for their feeding process. Her photonic cells drank in the radiation eagerly, converting it to usable energy every passing moment. It was precisely this quality that had drawn both species to this planet as a potential colony. A world with the right sun, the right atmosphere, the right conditions for life. How cruel that it had also brought them into conflict. Izilla's form was simple compared to the humans she had observed. Where humans seemed filled with curves and varying shapes, the Kritar had evolved for maximum surface area to absorb sunlight. Her limbs were long and thin, her torso broad and flat, every aspect of her body designed to capture photons. Her transparent skin revealed every major organ, every flowing system, every emotion that passed through her consciousness. She began walking toward the meeting spot, her movement fluid and graceful.
"At least use a communication drone," Sozi's voice urged. "You don't need to physically approach them."
"Use the long-range transmitter," another scientist suggested. "We can establish communication from a safe distance." "I'm monitoring human communication frequencies," the ship's communication officer reported. "There's increased chatter, but I can't decode it yet." "The security drones are standing by," the ship's tactical officer added. "We can extract you within seconds if needed. Just say the word." Izilla muted them all with a thought. She was determined to attempt face-to-face contact again, believing it was the greatest possible display of sincerity and regret for how the previous attempt had ended. How else could she demonstrate that the Kritar genuinely wanted to fix this misunderstanding? Distance communication would seem cowardly, as if they were afraid to face the consequences of their actions. The journey to the meeting spot was both longer and shorter than she expected. Longer because each step carried the weight of potential history, or potential disaster. As she reached the rough midpoint between her ship and the human settlement, Izilla noticed a sudden increase in activity among the distant tents. Figures moved quickly between structures, and she could see what might have been weapons being distributed. Her calm blue-green flickered with a touch of purple concern. Would they approach her after what had happened? Would they come in force this time, using numbers to ensure their safety? Or would fear keep them in their camp, weapons trained on her from a distance? She stopped walking and simply stood, making herself as visible and non-threatening as possible. The photonic cells in her skin sparkled as they worked, a gentle light show that her people found calming. She kept her arms at her sides, her posture open and relaxed, despite the tension she felt building in her photonic reserves. Every instinct told her to flee, to return to the safety of her ship, but she pushed the feelings down, maintaining her blue-green calm through force of will. Minutes passed. The orange sun moved frantically across the sky. The alien breeze stirred the vegetation around her, bringing new scents and the distant sounds of the human camp. She could hear voices, sharp, staccato sounds so different from the flowing tones of Kritar's speech. Were they arguing, planning, preparing an attack? Then she saw him, a single figure emerging from the human settlement, walking alone as she was, Her interest piqued, mixed with a flutter of the same purple concern. Was this bravery or foolishness on the human's part? Or perhaps, like her, he was a leader who felt the weight of responsibility for making this right? She found herself hoping it was the latter, another scientist, perhaps, who valued knowledge over fear. His gait was strange to her eyes. The bipedal locomotion was similar, but where Kritar flowed, humans seemed to fall forward with each step. The clothing was different from what the first group had worn, darker in color and seeming to fit more closely to his body. How did they manage their thermal regulation with such coverings? How did they communicate emotional states when so much was hidden? As he drew closer, she could make out more details. The human had short facial hair around his mouth and chin, another biological difference that fascinated her. What was its purpose? Warmth? Sexual display? Some kind of sensory organ? His movements became more cautious as the distance closed. She could see the rise and fall of his chest more clearly now, the rapid breathing that spoke of either exertion or nervousness, probably both. She wondered if he could see her emotional state as clearly. Did he understand that blue-green meant calm, or was he seeing threat in every swirl of fluid? Finally, they stood face to face, perhaps 2 meters apart, close enough to speak easily, far enough to react if things went wrong. Izilla could see the rapid rise and fall of his chest, breathing, she realized, pulling in oxygen to fuel his internal combustion. The rhythm was faster than she expected, almost frantic to her eyes. Such a different way of existing, yet here they stood as equals, both explorers far from home, both taking a risk for the sake of understanding. The human's face went through a series of muscle contractions that she struggled to interpret. His lips pulled back, revealing white teeth, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Without the context of internal fluid colors, she had no idea if this was aggression, fear, or something else entirely. His hands, she noticed, were held carefully at his sides, mirroring her own posture. Empty hands, no weapons. A good sign?
"Can you understand me?"
she asked, speaking slowly and clearly. "I can," he replied, and his translator voice carried notes of something that might have been surprise. The artificial tones of the translator couldn't quite mask what seemed to be genuine emotion. "I'm amazed your people sent anyone after the incident."
"I sent myself,"
Izilla clarified, noting how his facial muscles shifted again. Eyebrows rising, she catalogued. The movement seemed to indicate surprise, interest. She filed the observation away for later analysis.
"I'm in charge of our exploration team, and I didn't want to risk anyone else overreacting. The last encounter was unfortunate."
The human's face contorted further, his lips pulling back even more to reveal additional teeth. In any other species, such a display would be clearly aggressive, but something about the way his eyes changed, crinkling at the corners, suggested this might be something else. The skin around his eyes formed small lines, and there was a relaxation in his overall posture that didn't match a threat display. "That's an interesting coincidence," he said. "I'm also in charge, and I came along for the same reason. I don't want to risk anyone else overreacting. My name is James Stewart, xenobiologist and expedition leader." The name was strange on her auditory organs. Hard consonants that Kritar vocal cords would struggle to reproduce, but xenobiologist, that translated perfectly. A student of alien life, just as she was.
"I am Izilla, primary researcher and team coordinator,"
she responded, feeling some of her tension ease. The blue-green calm spreading more naturally now, less forced. Perhaps this human, James, understood the delicate nature of their situation.
"I must apologize for what happened. Our young scientist panicked when your equipment exploded. The drone should never have attacked. It was a failure of our protocols."
James's face went through another series of contractions. This time she thought she could read regret in the downturn of his mouth, the way his eyes seemed to soften. "I should be the one apologizing. Our engineers chose the worst possible moment to blow a generator. The timing couldn't have been worse. When I saw the recording, well, I can understand why your people were frightened. An explosion right as we're trying to make peaceful contact? It must have seemed like an attack. A small amount of yellow amusement flickered through Izilla's circulatory system, a response to the absurdity of their mutual misfortune. Two species, both reaching out in peace, derailed by fear and coincidence. She doubted the human could interpret the color change, but perhaps something in her posture communicated her feeling, because his face changed again in what she was beginning to recognize might be a positive expression. More teeth showing, but combined with the eye crinkling and a general relaxation of facial muscles. "Your species?" James said, his voice carrying what the translator interpreted as fascination. "You're transparent. I can see. Is that your circulatory system? Those flowing fluids, the colors? They're beautiful." The compliment was unexpected, and Izilla felt they were making progress now. "Yes," she confirmed, oddly pleased by his interest rather than disturbed. Most species they'd encountered had found Kretar transparency unsettling. "We evolved on a world lacking plant life. Our bodies produce our food. The transparency allows light to reach every cell. These fluids distribute the energy we collect directly from sunlight." "Incredible," James breathed, taking a half-step closer before catching himself. She noticed his hands moving slightly, as if he wanted to reach out but was restraining himself. "So, you don't need food for energy, just sunlight. That's the most elegant biological solution I've ever encountered."
"We consume material for mass and specific nutrients," Izilla explained, warming to the subject. The yellow of her amusement grew stronger, mixing with the gold of intellectual excitement. "But all of our energy comes from stellar radiation. Your species, though, my readings suggest you combust material internally for energy."
James's expression shifted to what she was beginning to categorize as positive. The smile, she decided to call it, based on the upward curve of his lips. "That's right. We eat food, breathe oxygen, and our cells basically burn the food for energy. It's not as efficient as your system, I imagine. We waste a lot of energy as heat."
"That explains your coverings," Izilla said, understanding dawning. "Thermoregulation. You need to trap the heat you produce."
"Exactly. Well, that and protection from the environment, and, cultural modesty." Another fascinating difference. Taboos about the body itself. How did they conduct medical examinations? How did they judge health without seeing internal states?
"Different evolutionary pressures,"
Izilla said diplomatically.
"Your world has many plants, correct?"
"Exactly." James's excitement was evident even through the translator. His whole body seemed to become more animated, gestures becoming broader. "This is amazing. First contact with an alien species, and we're discussing xenobiology. My colleagues back home would be so jealous. Do you know how rare this is? Two sapient species, meeting by chance, able to communicate?"
"After attacking each other,"
Izilla reminded him, though her yellow amusement was growing stronger. "A misunderstanding," James said firmly, "based on fear, not malice. We have to be able to find common ground." The conversation flowed more easily after that. They discussed their respective missions, both species exploring this world as a potential colony site. The similarities were striking. Both had sent small scientific teams first. Both were evaluating resources and habitability. Both had protocols for dealing with indigenous life forms. Neither had expected to encounter another spacefaring species. When James mentioned that humans were particularly interested in the areas where plant life was abundant, Izilla felt another flicker of yellow amusement. The emotion was strong enough now that she was sure he must be able to see it, even if he couldn't interpret it yet.
"My species prefers the desert regions," she said, "where sunlight is most abundant and cloud cover is minimal. We have no use for the areas you're investigating."
James's face went through what she now recognized as a strong positive expression, many teeth showing. eyes crinkling significantly, the muscles around his mouth pulling upward in a way that seemed to transform his entire face. You're telling me we could potentially share this planet? Your people want the deserts, we want the forests and grasslands?
It would appear so,
Izilla agreed, her own amusement growing stronger, the yellow mixing with gold satisfaction. No territorial disputes, no resource competition, James said, his voice carrying what the translator suggested was humor. We might be the first two species in the history of the galaxy to achieve peaceful coexistence simply because we want completely different real estate. The orange sun continued its path across the sky as they talked. Despite their radical biological differences, or perhaps because of them, communication came easier than either had expected. They were both scientists, both explorers, both seeking understanding in a vast universe. We should meet again, James suggested as their conversation drew to a natural close. Bring some of our scientists, share data. If we're gonna be neighbors on this world, we should probably get to know each other better.
Agreed,
Izilla said, her internal fluids now flowing with the gold of satisfaction mixed with hope.
Tomorrow? Same time? Perhaps with smaller groups initially, to avoid overwhelming anyone.
Perfect, James agreed. And Izilla, thank you for taking this risk. I know it couldn't have been easy after what happened.
The risk was worth it, she replied simply. Understanding usually is.
As they parted ways, each returning to their respective camps, Izilla felt the weight of possibility settling on her shoulders. This was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, biological differences, cultural misunderstandings, and the inevitable fears that came with the unknown. But for the first time since the rusted dagger had clattered to the ground, covered in human blood, she believed those challenges could be overcome. The future stretched before them, as vast and full of potential as the universe itself, and perhaps, she thought as she watched James's retreating figure, the rust on that dagger wouldn't be a symbol of failure after all. Perhaps it would become a reminder that even the most fundamental differences, oxygen-breathing combustion engines and photosynthetic energy collectors, could find common ground when fear gave way to curiosity.